Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for coming along. Apologies for the change in schedule, but you can't get in the way of Werner. It's something I've learnt myself over the years. Welcome to our session today. This is ENT206, using enterprise support to the fullest. My name's Simon Alicia, and I'm Principal Solution Architect here at Amazon Web Services, quite obviously based in Australia. I'll also be joined by Fergus Hammer, who's from Adobe Systems. He'll be sharing the stage with me a little bit later on and giving us some fantastic insights. But what I wanted to start with is a bit of a philosophy. You've probably heard many times in the conference so far something that really is a strong part of our DNA at Amazon, which is customer obsession. The desire to understand what customers want, what they need, and to deliver it to them in the easiest possible fashion. And that's even baked into the overall Amazon business mission, which is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. So Jeff Bezos is a fan of setting high bars, so just the best on Earth is fine. We don't need to do the galaxy or the solar system at this stage, but we do try and set a high bar, and we live at this value each and every day. And this is often borne out by various surveys and measures, etc. And these are nice and interesting, but to be quite honest, the best and most positive feedback we get is the direct feedback that we do get for customers, and that's what's important. And as much as we like to hear what they are liking, we also love to hear what they don't like. In fact, my boss often, when he meets with customers, the first question will be, what don't we have? What don't we do for you at the moment that you need? Which is a very different and nice way to attack things. Now, we're going to talk about support today. There are multiple levels of support that Amazon has, Amazon Web Services provides. In fact, it's interesting, I often talk to customers who don't even know that we have support, which is kind of interesting. We have a very rich support offering. We have developer support, business support, but today we'll be focusing on enterprise support, because it's got all the good stuff. And if you're doing things at scale, and if you're doing things in a serious fashion, this is a very important part of your portfolio. So first, the basics, using support. What do you get? Well, firstly, when you have enterprise support, you have an unlimited number of contacts and an unlimited number of cases that you can log. So you can go crazy, log to your heart's content, have as many people logging cases as you like. However, the fundamental thing is they need to have access to do so. So as everything in AWS, you control who can do what. So through the GUI, I've given you some fancy template script as well, just to really make it interesting. You can enable which users of your AWS account can log cases. Once they have that capability, they can log as many cases as they like. That incurs no charge. You can also choose the way you want to interact with support. This is very important because it's changing over time. So of course we have the web-based support where it's via a web form and email, which is often useful for less critical type things. We have phone support where you enter your phone number and we call you, because we don't want you to bear the cost of making that phone call. So that's good if you want to have that immediate interaction. But a third method that is proving really popular with customers is live chat. And particularly in the more technical part of the community, they like to be able to do a couple of things at once. They're chatting in one window with support, they're trying something out on their system on another, and they're getting things done really fast. Another benefit is it gives you an audit trail, because the contents of the chat are added to the case. At the end of the chat interaction, the support engineer will summarize what was discussed in a nice email to give you kind of a neater summary than the chat, but you kind of got that audit trail as well. It's also important as a customer to choose the correct severity level. We can't decide for you what's important to you. That's for you to do. And we'll respond based on your advice. With enterprise support, you have access to the critical severity level, which gives you a 15-minute response time. Now, when we talk about response time, we're not talking about we acknowledge you lodged a case. We talk about we're actually now talking with you about your case. We're starting the activity to help you solve your problem. So you can choose what the severity is. You may have a development system that's down, but you've got 600 developers on an hourly rate who need that system to be up again. That's a critical error. That's a critical severity. Other things may not be so urgent. You may have a billing inquiry. Hey, if it takes 4 hours to find out about that, you really don't mind. You may just want to have a casual question about some feature or function. That may just be a low or even a normal. The other thing that happens with enterprise support, though, is when you log your cases, you get special routing through the support organization to get immediate access to the most advanced and most senior engineers. So you are truly getting that white glove experience. Now, people often say, well, why do I need support? And it's often because bad things happen to good people, as they say. And it's interesting, we had a customer who called our Sydney support centre recently, and this person was almost incoherent on the phone. Like the support engineer had to actually escalate to the support duty manager and say, please talk to this customer. I can't actually understand what the customer is saying. And they kind of decoded what was going on. And this customer had migrated their WordPress blog from an existing provider onto AWS. They used Elastic Beanstalk, they did the migration, it seemed to all be working fine. He logged in this morning, white screen on the browser. Freak out, because of course, no backups, years of content, you know the story. So the support manager said, look, just relax, go have a cup of tea. We'll ring you back as soon as we find out something. We'll get back to you straight away. So this person got off the phone, just completely a mess. And they did the investigation. They checked, was it moved across properly from the provider? Maybe DNS was incorrect, etc. No, that wasn't the problem. The load balancer was correct. The nodes were correct. They actually were able to figure out that clearly what had happened is that the owner of the blog had applied a WordPress plugin update, and it had broken. But this person wasn't particularly savvy in the way WordPress actually works, and it broke the site. So they got on the line and called back this customer, who burst into tears with joy that it was fixed. It was amazing. It's like, oh, thank you, thank you. And they connected this customer with a partner who's a WordPress specialist to say, look, talk to this person, they'll come, they'll log into your system, they'll get you up and going. So just that help, and that help in emotional times of crisis is often really important. So what you get with enterprise support is this very important person called a technical account manager. And this person's job is to understand your environment. Because whilst there are many commonalities within businesses, there are lots of really nuanced differences. And as we all know, when we change jobs, we discover those nuanced differences very keenly. There can be political aspects at play. There can be just general environmental factors. There's the line of business that you're in. There are operational challenges, business imperatives. This person's job is to understand your business the way you understand your business and to essentially be part of it. They also will produce outputs and deliverables to you the way you want them to be. You can choose what you get. If you want a monthly incident report that says, here are the cases that were logged, here's when they were picked up, here's what the answer was, here's the root cause scenario, etc., they can do it for you. If you have projects that you have in the wings, they're happy to help you advise on that. Question for you. How many support people in this type of environment that we work in will come to you and say, here's how you can save some money? So this graph I've got here is from one of our Australian support technical account managers who was putting together a proposal for a customer, unsolicited, just said, hey, if you do reserved instances, you can save anything from $50,000 to $74,000 a year. That's the kind of report you like to get. Now, whether you action it or not is totally up to you, but at least you know that there's the opportunity. The other thing they do is they act as a bridge for you to feed back into our own development organisation. So if you have things you want to see, features you want, they can help document those, understand your use case, and prioritise those. And who knows, maybe you end up on the keynote stage announcing some new feature function that was your idea. But they can do many other things as well. In fact, one of our team in Australia, they ran a tech summit day for the customer because the customer had a very heavy development focus. So the technical account manager organised a whole lot of guest speakers to talk about a wide variety of topics that made sense to that organisation. That's more than just support in my book. So what about some more advanced use? Well, obviously, you're building systems, you're doing it on a large scale. It'd be nice to get some expertise help with that. So you can. If you have enterprise support, you get direct access to solution architects. People like myself, who work in the industry for a long time, who have deep architectural knowledge of how to build and deliver systems. And you can use us to review new projects, do architecture reviews, do architectural audits, best practices, patterns, etc. It's just another resource you have available to you. But really, when it comes to support, reactive is the past and proactive is the future. We want to be more proactive about how we do things. We realised that this was not enough to just do this sort of table stake support. So that's why we created Trusted Advisor. Trusted Advisor is a solution that automatically checks your account for a number of different rules and metrics and feeds them back to you in a proactive fashion. There are a huge number of rules already in the database. We have over 100 on the way as well, so it's a significant number of checks that happen. And they're broken up into some broad categories. We have cost optimization checks, things that will say, are you wasting money here? Do you have resources that aren't being used? Do you have elastic load balancers lying around? Pieces of storage that you haven't accessed for a long time? In fact, just through this alone, just this year, we've saved our customers $140 million of spend by actioning the recommendations that we've made. When was the last time a vendor came to you and said, hey, spend less money, you're wasting this stuff? The other dimension is security, obviously a key concern. This tool constantly runs checks on your environments looking for the obvious holes. Maybe someone's created a security group and they've opened the RDP port and they've said it's open to the internet. Probably not a great idea from a security perspective. This will alert you and tell you. Are the security settings on S3 correct? Is your database security settings correct? Are you using identity and access management correctly? This will validate all of that for you. Great auditing tool. Fault tolerance. Are we deployed across multiple availability zones? Have we been taking snapshots of our critical data on a regular basis? Is our VPN connected in the way that we think it's connected? All these hygiene things that we need to be sure of. And finally, performance. Are things running too hot? Do I need to reassess my workload and how I deploy it to make it run in a more optimal fashion? The other nice thing it does is it keeps an eye on limits for you. So with every AWS account, when you create it, you have a set of limits on certain resources to start with. So for example, if you created a new account right now, you'd have a limit of 20 EC2 instances per region that you could run at any one time. Now clearly most customers want to run way more than that. The limits are easily lifted. They're not a commitment, they're just a limit on how many you can create. This tool gives you a very easy graphical view of how many you've got, what your limits are, where you are in the continuum, and it'll give the green, amber, red type translation for you as well. But as with many of these services, we recognised that us trying to build everything for you is not going to give you necessarily the outcome you want. So we said, well, why don't we wrap the whole support experience in an application programming interface? Let's make it so that you can create a case through the command line or through the API. You can look at what's in the case. You can resolve a case. You can add communication to a case. You can look at all those checks that we saw before. You can describe them in code and display them. In fact, it creates the software developer's dream of never having to talk to a human being in any interaction whatsoever. It's fantastic. I can talk to support without talking to support. And we've done this in a way where we've wrapped it in all of our SDKs, our software development kits, so that you can use the language that makes sense to you to get the job done in the fastest way possible. .NET, Ruby, CLI, PowerShell, PHP, go for your life. What this means is that you can build support your way. Do it the way that suits you. A couple of examples. There's a stealthy startup in the Bay Area. They use the API to monitor their limits. They're kind of running on the smell of an oily rag, so they keep their limits pretty lean. So they like to know when they're reaching their limits so they can make a choice. Do I want to increase my limit, or do I want to re-architect how I'm doing this? I.e., does it make sense to spend the money, or do I need to find a smarter way? And they have that on one of their screens that's kind of flipping different statuses, and this comes up from time to time. Company in New Zealand, again, didn't want to talk to human beings. They just tied the AWS support system into their trouble ticket system. They can log something internally, it goes to AWS, it gets actioned, it comes back. Beautiful, closed loop. Of course, you can come up with lots more fun things that we can come up with. It's really a case of your idea here. Another really important is something called Infrastructure Event Management, IEM. This service came around because this is kind of what we view as what we want, how we want to be when we launch our new systems. Could be a migration, could be an upgrade, could be anything. We envisage the rocket shining, flying through the air, success, pats on the back in the control room, everything's fantastic. Unfortunately, this is the more common scenario that we see. And in fact, there was a recent launch in Australia of a big retailing campaign, and it wasn't on AWS at the time. It was a very inelastic platform, and it sort of did this, it cratered. And the CTO basically locked himself in the toilet for the entire duration of the event because it was that bad. And so really we want our customers not to have to endure that. And one really good way to do this is to create the war room, is to create critical support for an event at the time of the event. Could be a product launch, ad campaign, a big event like a sports event or a music event, tickets going on sale, or a cloud migration is a really popular one a lot of my customers have been using this for. Because what it gives you is 0-second response time. That's an SLA you can't beat. When someone's sitting right next to you and you say, hey, this ain't working, let's fix it. It also brings together a number of key stakeholders to make sure this works properly. This is the process. Essentially, there's an initiation process where we get together, understand your environment, review the architecture, review what costs will be involved in terms of running that architecture at scale. The good thing about IAM is it's included in enterprise support, and you can have as many of them as you like. So you could be doing this once a week if your environment required it. They also review the limits that are on your account to make sure you don't bump into anything unexpected. Very importantly, we will also assist you in your performance testing, because obviously you'd never put anything into production without performance testing at first, would you? So it's important to do that. Then at the time, we do the real-time support, sitting in the war room, pizzas, phones, the whole thing. Everyone's together. Hopefully nothing happens, but if something does, you're good to go. And then importantly, at the end, there is a review process where we go back and say, here's what worked really well, here's what we could do better next time, here's some problems we found, or here's what went really well. Slice it and dice it as you will. So an example of how this works. So we had a large national one-time only type event, and they didn't want to use AWS for production. They said, we're going to use you for DR, because we don't have it at the moment, and we'll just run production, but we'll use you guys as well. They signed up for enterprise support, they got IAM, brought together a team of 12 different stakeholders, lots of different companies, in many cases what you would call strange bedfellows, and reviewed the architecture, did a transactional load test, got up to 12,000 requests per second. Everyone was comfortable. In fact, they were so comfortable that during the live event, they made a really interesting call. They said, you know what? We're really confident that what we've done on AWS is going to stand up. Let's flip it over. So during the event, they flipped it over and ran for 2 hours on AWS as a proof point to be able to go back to their management and say, hey, not only is this DR, we did DR and it worked totally fine. Because for them in the future, because it's such a periodic event, they're kind of thinking, well, this is a perfect cloud workload. Now they've proved to themselves that it works. But they had that confidence because they had that assistance. But enough from me. Now it's my great pleasure to invite Fergus Hammer on stage. Fergus is Senior Manager of Cloud Hosting at Adobe Systems, and he has some fantastic insights to share with you. Thanks, Fergus.
So I think I'm having a hard time getting the image of the CTO stuck in the bathroom out of my mind right now. It's a little bit disturbing this early in the morning. So I attended reInvent last year. Found it really useful, had a good time, didn't drink too many beers. So when it was announced this year, I registered pretty much right away. Unfortunately, I wasn't so organized when it came to booking a hotel. I booked a hotel, I think maybe last week, and consequently I'm in the Outer Mongolia hotel at reInvent. So it's a long walk. It was a long walk here this morning. And as I was walking here, I was reading my email, trying to avoid all the gamblers in the casino, trying not to get lost. And I saw an email that came in last night, and it's not directly related to support, but I thought I would share it with you. It was an email from our shipping department in San Francisco, where I'm based. And the email says, "Hi, Fergus. There are 19 really heavy, really large boxes in the shipping department, and they're all addressed to you. What do you want us to do with them?" And I know what those boxes are. In every single one of those boxes, there are 20 brand new hard drives, never used, still in their little foil baggies. And they're hard drives that we bought as spare hard drives for a storage system that runs out of our colo in LA. And it's a storage system that, along with the whole colo, we're shutting down right now. And it's a storage system that has several thousand hard drives. And in that colo, we're getting rid of everything. And we're trying to redeploy some of that equipment to other parts of the company. But in a lot of cases, redeployment is going to mean responsibly recycling that hardware. But these hard drives, I couldn't bring myself to go and shred all these brand new hard drives. So I got them all shipped to San Francisco. And when I get home, I'm going to be sending an email out to all my colleagues in our office saying, come by my desk if you want a free hard drive. And I can't tell you, well, I guess I can tell you, I am incredibly excited that after we shut down this colo and 2 more colos, I'm never going to have to do that again. Because what that represents is just, well, it's making me really popular amongst my colleagues in San Francisco, but it represents a giant waste. It represents investment and time that we spent on something we never used, and now we're more or less throwing it away. So not directly related to support, but it's I think, a story that illustrates why Amazon, for us, why using AWS has been such a fantastic change. So let's talk a little bit about support. So when Amazon asked me whether I'd like to talk about enterprise support, I thought, this is going to be a really short conversation. This is going to be me saying, enterprise support is fantastic and you should go buy it. And I am saying that, but the interesting story, the slightly longer story, the story that will take up a few slides is how we came to that, how we came to that idea, how I came to that opinion. And for us, and Simon has taught me some things about enterprise support I actually didn't realize, so that's helpful. For us, the process of getting enterprise support was really quick. It was about 3 minutes. I remember being on a call with my boss. And the call was, how quickly can we get somebody from Amazon onto a war room when we've got a problem that's affecting our customers? So I literally went to aws.amazon.com, typed in support, looked at that chart that you were showing, looked at the smallest number of minutes and said, that's what we're going to buy. And literally didn't think about anything else at all. So us purchasing enterprise support was dictated by incident response processes we already had in place at Adobe. I didn't look at any of the other stuff, but it's turned out that that other stuff has been broadly very useful in a variety of different ways. That's the first thing. And the second thing, and I guess the more important thing, is the reason we purchased it in the first place, getting somebody on the call to help us fix a problem, has turned out to be way more useful, a way better experience than I would have ever imagined. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to give a little background to what Adobe does, in particular with one of our products with AWS. So little Adobe story. Primarily, we're providing tools that enable our customers to create, deploy, measure, and optimize digital content. And I'm going to talk about Creative Cloud, which is really in the create and deploy area of our business. So Adobe's got a lot of cloud products, and we have more, it seems like we have more every day. Most of these are either running in AWS, or we're in the process of moving them into AWS, or we have plans to do that in the future. So a little bit of history, kind of backing up several years now. I'd say sort of 7 or 8 years ago, we started looking at what it would mean to take some of our desktop products and move them into the cloud. We saw this trend coming. And we let a lot of teams at Adobe go and experiment. And one of the experiments and turned into a real product, a real service, was Photoshop.com. So Photoshop.com, which has actually just very recently been replaced by a fantastic new product from Adobe called Revel, which runs and has always run in Amazon. Photoshop.com was a lightweight version of Photoshop, some very simple image editing capabilities, plus some really nice features for sharing photos with people. And it ran in this colo in LA. It ran on the storage system I was talking about, and it ran on low-cost hardware. And my predecessor said, I'm not going to go and buy a lot of expensive hardware. I'm going to buy a lot of really cheap servers. I'm going to tell you they're going to fail, and I'm going to tell you I'm not going to fix them when they do fail. Or if I do fix them, I'm going to get around to it in a couple of days. So what it meant is that the Photoshop.com team and all the other teams that were using this platform had to build high availability into their applications. And this was sort of almost inadvertently a fantastic decision because it set us up very well for building in the true public cloud, for building in AWS. In 2009, Adobe purchased Omniture, and this really catapulted us from a lot of experiments in the cloud to being a giant cloud provider, being, I think, perhaps the #2 company that's hosting software, is providing software via the cloud. And then around the same time, we also made the decision to take a whole bunch of people. I remember I said teams were experimenting with the cloud, and what that meant is we had a lot of engineers doing operations. We had people who should have been building code, writing code, rebooting servers at 2 in the morning. So we took the decision it's always 2 in the morning. No matter what country you're in, it's going to be 2 in the morning. So we made the decision to grab a bunch of operations people, some people like me from IT, some engineering folks, and put them into one operations team. Because the theory was it's much smarter to have a dedicated operations team than having engineers operate products. So speaking about one of the products in particular, Creative Cloud. So Creative Cloud is our flagship creative product, and it's the evolution of Creative Suite. It's an evolution of Creative Suite that's been driven by, and I think I'm missing a comma here, it's an evolution of Creative Suite that's been driven by 3 trends we identified several years ago: mobile, social, and cloud. And what Creative Cloud is our traditional desktop products delivered more efficiently updated a lot more efficiently. It includes some cloud capabilities for our customers to store creative content they've built, they've created, and to share that with colleagues, to sync that to their desktop. It also includes some services that are inherently cloud-based products. They couldn't exist in the desktop world. So some web hosting capabilities. If you've ever read a magazine or a publication on a tablet, you've effectively used one of our products that we sell to publishers to build those publications. And it includes integration with Behance. And Behance is a company we bought recently, and it is the leading online platform for showcasing and discovering creative work. And if you think I memorized that description, you're absolutely right. So how do we pick AWS to run Creative Cloud? Well, the first thing is we did it really, really quickly. In fact, of the 21 years I've been at Adobe, I think it's the fastest decision I've ever seen us make. And the decision was made really driven by several factors. The first one was time to market. We were talking about Creative Cloud. It was a small group of people getting together saying, what are we going to do? How are we going to move into the cloud with the Creative Suite business? We were talking about this in I think it was actually January. It was early 2011. And we wanted to show customers something real in October, so a really super short time to market. The second thing was we had some significant pockets of AWS experience. A colleague of mine, Mitch Nelson, in the digital marketing side of the business, the measure and optimize part of Adobe's business, he'd had some really good experience with Amazon, some really positive experience with Amazon. We had a lot of aging hardware and colos. We were missing some technology pieces we knew we'd need for Creative Cloud. And we had a fairly limited footprint in terms of global distribution. And then lastly, and I think this is, was my gut feeling at the time, it just kind of felt like the right time to make this decision. Felt like a good time to make the jump to AWS. Just as kind of a little segue here, I mentioned a few slides ago that about 5 years ago, we centralized operations of a lot of hosted products. Those hosted products, though, were still completely separate silos of application layer. So when we first started talking about shared cloud, we said, let's not build yet another application stack. Let's take a bunch of stuff we're going to have to build for Creative Cloud, and let's turn it into an internal platform as a service we called Share Cloud. So it's a bunch of sort of Adobe plumbing. It's the ability to upload a Photoshop file and turn it into a JPEG, or to sync a file, or to share it. It's things that a lot of the different Adobe products will need. So instead of building it for one product, let's build it as a platform that lots of products can use. So how did we start with Creative Cloud? Well, fortunately, we started with a new code base. We started with some key new hires who had a lot of Amazon experience, for which I thank my colleagues at Netflix. And we started initially just using the compute and storage service, so a limited use of other Amazon services. And lastly, I certainly started with some incorrect assumptions. My assumption was that Amazon Compute was elastic, API-driven, but fairly unreliable. An individual Amazon instance was not particularly reliable, sort of similar to the computers we had in our colos. I think I also made the mistake that I thought a data center, or a region rather, at Amazon equaled a data center. And of course, it equals many, many data centers. So what we knew about Amazon, well, we knew it was elastic storage and compute. We knew Amazon had a global footprint. And both of these things we could have done ourselves. I'm not sure whether it's particularly easy to see, but the little red stars, or the half yellow, half red stars, are places that Amazon had a region and we also had a colo. So both of those things we could have done ourselves. But we also knew it was low cost. And that's something we knew even almost 3 years ago. We knew that at the scale at which we were operating, which we were going to operate, there was no way we could build this system at a cost that could match what Amazon could do. And lastly, and perhaps this was more in the category of assumptions, I certainly had this vision of Amazon as this service provided by a bunch of super intelligent aliens, that there's no humans behind it. It's just an API. It's a website. It's a bunch of documentation, and you're completely on your own. And that's, I think, really relevant to the support conversation, because that's true in one sense. It's true that Amazon is very API-driven, but it's very incorrect in the sense that there are fantastic humans that are available to assist us using AWS. So what was a lot better than we thought about using AWS? And this first couple of things I'll talk about a little bit more in a few more slides. Really kind of two things. The higher level services that Amazon provides to us, above compute, above storage, they're really the magic. They're the things that either let us focus on building features for customers, or let us operate our service more efficiently, or let us do both. The other thing that services are added and improved at just a ridiculous rate. I think half my job and half the job of several of my colleagues is just keeping up with what Amazon is doing. And actually, when I was hiring the guy that came from Netflix, I was working with HR, and we were searching for people, using LinkedIn. And the HR person made a mistake in the search, and instead of searching for people with AWS skills, what we ended up searching for was open positions at Amazon in the AWS team. And there were 550 open positions at Amazon and AWS. And I looked at that and thought, I don't think we can out-innovate Amazon. I think if they've got 550 open positions, that's a pretty good sign that we're on the right track using Amazon. It's a pretty good sign that they know what they're doing. And that's proved to be more true than I could have possibly imagined. And then the last thing, the thing that's been way better than we could have possibly imagined, sort of the whole point of this conversation, is enterprise support. Enterprise support has been way better than I could have possibly envisioned, and I'll give some really specific examples of that in a minute. So going sort of back a little bit to talking about architecture. So real quickly, a Creative Cloud and Shared Cloud underneath it are in multiple availability zones for high availability. We do what Amazon tells us we should do. And they're in multiple regions. And we're in multiple regions not for high availability, but for customer experience. So if you're a customer in Germany and you sign up for Creative Cloud, your content's going to be stored in AWS in Dublin. If you're in Sydney, it's going to be stored in Tokyo. So we do that for performance reasons for customers. And we're likely to use more regions as Amazon brings them online. We're using 3 regions right now. And we're using a lot of AWS services. The only reason I don't list them is it would take up the whole slide. Actually, I've talked a little bit about an email I got from our shipping department earlier. I got another email from a product manager at Amazon. I think a product manager for Mechanical Turk. Mechanical Turk is, I think, maybe the only Amazon service we don't use, and he invited me to meet with him when I was here. So perhaps by the end of the session, we'll use all of, the end of this conference, we'll be using all of Amazon services. And lastly, we use a variety of third-party tools and some Amazon tools to automate deployment and configuration management. And really, you can use Amazon and you can use AWS to replace a colo, but you're not using it as efficiently as possible unless you're automating deployment and automating configuration. So, a little bit more on these Amazon services, particularly the higher level ones I was talking about a minute ago. I think the first point to make, though, is Amazon has a rock-solid base of elastic, API-driven, low-cost, globally available compute and storage. And if they didn't, we wouldn't be standing here talking to you about our use of AWS. That's absolutely critical, and it's absolutely fantastic. But I think it's the other services above that that are really what provides the value to Adobe. And I think there's 2 examples. And the first one I'd use is SQS, Simple Queuing Service. So one of the things that Creative Cloud does is you upload files, and something happens to those files, and you see the result. So there's a queuing technology behind that that's taking jobs in and handing them off to a bunch of worker machines and returning the results. And originally, that queuing technology was something that we took care of, we engineered, we managed. And that queuing technology is absolutely essential. But of all the Creative Cloud customers that we have, I'm sure there's not one of them would ever come up to us and say, your queuing system is really awesome in Creative Cloud, I love it. So we replaced it with SQS. We replaced it with Simple Queuing Service from Amazon. And that enables the engineers who are working on queuing to work on something more valuable to Adobe's customers, work on something that actually our customers care about that's adding features. And then the second thing is that these higher level services that Amazon have enable us to deploy and manage infrastructure via code and in an automated way. And I think sort of the comparison some people make, and it's not, it's not a really good comparison, is they look at the public cloud, they look at AWS as if it's a slightly better version of what you could do with virtualization in-house. right? Instead of going into a colo and racking servers and plugging in cables, you're clicking buttons. The point for us is that we're no longer clicking buttons. The person who used to be racking the server is not using a GUI, is not doing things manually. They're actually writing code. And actually, it's too bad he's not here. I would mock him a little bit. There's a colleague of mine who didn't believe in any of this crazy Amazon stuff, this public cloud stuff, thought it was silly, and really liked plugging in hardware and dealing with switches and routers and firewalls and load balancers and so on. And he went to several Amazon classes and kind of came out the other end completely converted. There's probably no more passionate zealot than a convert. And now, instead of clicking on buttons and making changes in a GUI, he's writing CloudFormation templates. He's writing CloudFormation templates that describe our infrastructure, whether it's a server or a load balancer or a firewall or a security group, whatever it is. He's writing code that now describes that programmatically rather than doing it manually. So he's kind of like the RoboCop sysadmin, right? He had the skills originally, like RoboCop the cop did, and he didn't have a horrible accident like RoboCop, so maybe this is not a good comparison, but he's had all this stuff kind of laid on top of him, all this knowledge and this skill, and he's got all the original existing fantastic background knowledge that he had, but now it's brought to the next level by taking advantages of the services in Amazon that let us describe things as code. So this is a really, really big deal to us, and it's really what's enabled us to use AWS most efficiently. So, lessons learned. I think the first couple of ones are simple, and again, it doesn't show up super well on the slide here, but the first line is something you'll hear pretty regularly here at reInvent. Using multiple AZs is essential for availability, high availability. But the word that's key here, I think, is improving. And the reason I use improving is that when I compare the compute we had in our old colos to individual compute instances at Amazon, the Amazon ones are about as reliable. In fact, I had a conversation with some of the other Adobe folks here this week. And I said, how many times can you remember in the last 3 years that an Amazon instance has just simply disappeared? It's just gone away. Because that's what everybody hears about, right? Amazon Compute is massively scalable and elastic, but it's unreliable. Compute just disappears. And the answer was never. We've never once had an Amazon instance that's just gone away. So for me, it's kind of an interesting comparison that I would say a single Amazon instance, which you should never use. You should obviously always use multiple instances and multiple AZs. But a single Amazon instance, in our experience, is more reliable than a single server in one of our colos. I think the other comment here is that concerns about cost runaways are definitely exaggerated. And Simon, you had a nice slide that actually showed some of the limits for new accounts. My concern has been less about cost at Adobe and more making sure that our engineers are exposed to using AWS, that it's really easy for somebody to start using it. So I think concerns about cost runaways are definitely exaggerated. The last thing, and again, sort of back to the theme of the conversation, Amazon support is superb. Let's talk about this in a little bit more detail. So we use support really for kind of three main things, and I'm going to talk about the first two, and then a little bit more detail on sort of dealing with disruptions. These first two things are something that we've really only started doing in the last year or so. And these are the things that Simon showed are on top of getting somebody on a phone call really quickly. So when a team at Adobe, and Adobe's a company of 10,000 people, and there's an awful lot of people who are still building shrink-wrap software and are making the move to the cloud, we have a lot of teams come to our team and say, can you help us with moving to Amazon? A couple of years ago, we would spend a lot of time with those teams. Now, more commonly, we grab the Adobe team, grab the Amazon team, put them together and say, okay, you guys talk with one another. Because the Amazon support organization not only obviously knows their service really well, but they actually know what we're doing internally with that platform, that shared cloud platform I mentioned. Our Amazon support folks in our technical account management and all the people we work with at Amazon are very familiar with what we're doing internally. So rather than spending a lot of time with people sort of one-on-one, we can just kind of connect Amazon support, connect our teams, and have a really productive outcome from that. I think the other thing we do more of now is work with Amazon to review architecture of both existing products that are already running in AWS and products that we want to move into AWS. I mentioned Behance, a new service, a few slides ago, and several of us were on site with the Behance team in New York last week talking about how we're going to move them out of the colo they're in today and into Amazon. And it's a really sort of productive, exciting conversation because they go from knowing really nothing about AWS to, at the end of the week, starting to figure out how we're actually going to do this migration. But lastly, and this is the reason we went and signed up for support in the first place, dealing with disruptions, dealing with when there's a problem. So, I'm not sure whether this is a common experience. I think, sadly, it probably is. I've had a long history of being on incident calls where we try to get support from a vendor on the line. And it goes like this. You get somebody on a call. It's hard to get somebody on a call from a vendor, an IT vendor. You get somebody on a call, and they're no use at all because all that person's job is to route the call somewhere else. So then you get the second person on the call, and the second person maybe knows a little bit, certainly doesn't know anything about your environment, anything about your infrastructure, and often doesn't really know a lot about the products they're supporting either. So then you get the third person on the call, and it's the third person that is actually useful. And while this is happening, you've got an outage and you've got customers yelling at you and tweeting about how awful your service is. And that's been my experience. I hope perhaps people have had a better experience than I have. Our experience with Amazon is exactly the opposite. We pay for the 15-minute response time. It's never been 15 minutes. It's always a lot less than 15 minutes. But more importantly, what I notice is when I jump on a call, and there's a bunch of Adobe people talking about an incident we're having, I often don't realize there's an Amazon person on the call. I hear somebody talking, and it takes me a few minutes to realize they're from Amazon Support. Because first of all, they're incredibly knowledgeable, sort of just at a general technical level. But more importantly, they're knowledgeable about what we're doing. They're knowledgeable about the service that we're having the incident with. They are already knowledgeable with what we're doing. And it's hard to overstate how important that is to us in resolving issues quickly, that the person from the vendor not only knows the product really well, not only gets on the call really quickly, but knows what we're doing already before they ever join the call. And I think the last point here really summarizes that AWS technical staff feel like Adobe employees in the best possible way. So, a couple examples, and Simon had some nice stories about this as well. For the Creative Cloud launch, we worked with Amazon very closely to ensure that we were able to handle the load. And it was a load that we really had a hard time predicting. We really didn't know what it was going to be like. So Amazon provided us some really good recommendations about what to do. And then more recently with Hurricane Sandy, this may not literally be true. I'm not sure whether our TAMs had rain jackets and microphones, but it felt like they did because they were giving us very regular, very useful updates on what was going on in US East. And US East is in Virginia, and obviously Hurricane Sandy was going to possibly affect where we were hosted out of. And in that sort of situation, it's very hard to be over-communicated with. But Amazon communicated to us in a way that was useful and actionable, and it was very comforting. So, sort of some results and next steps, and I think I'm going to go bottom to top here. So we've used a Trusted Advisor. We'd like to use more of the Trusted Advisor capability. Look, anytime we use it, we find places that we can save money. And I think Simon's story about it's unusual for a vendor to help you reduce cost is definitely something we've experienced. I feel like we get badgered by our account management team to stop spending so much money, and they tell us regularly how we could avoid spending as much money as we do, and that's pretty unusual. There's not a lot of vendors that tell you how to spend less money with them. And I think something I forgot to mention, and it, talking about this reminds me of it, is I said that Amazon originally, I kind of thought of it as this faceless API providing organization, and then we discovered that support was great. But then the other thing that was really surprising is that what I would consider traditional account management, the guy at the vendor that you talk to, the person you talk to at the vendor, that experience has been really positive as well. I hear vendors always talk about the partnership, the strategic partnership they have, and it's very rarely a partnership. It's generally a partnership in the sense of they'd like us to give them a lot of money. And I feel that AWS is one of the few organizations where it truly is a partnership, and I feel AWS is really invested in our success as well. So that's also better than I could have expected. I think the only downside to that relationship is that Amazon's DNA of low cost follows into our relationship with Amazon on account management level. So if we get taken out to dinner by our account manager, it's a burger joint and maybe one drink. No free baseball tickets and no freebies, which is great because that really demonstrates that Amazon's DNA from their founding 25 years ago is low cost. I think lastly, the bottom line here, sort of two bottom lines, is enterprise support for us is absolutely essential. It's absolutely essential in the way we assumed it would be when we first signed up for it, but it's become absolutely essential in a whole variety of other ways that I think we didn't even imagine when we first got it. And then lastly, really sort of the bigger picture about AWS. I'm saying here that it's lower cost, it's higher availability, reduced time to market, but I've missed out the most important line. And the most important point here is that when I talk about Creative Cloud, using AWS has given us the ability to just make a better product that our customers like more. And that's really the main point. And that's, I think, the end of my discussion about AWS support. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Fergus, and please stay on the stage. Just to, I guess, that's some really good insights there from Fergus in terms of how they took advantage of it. And many organizations do, because really, we kind of all have our own Super Bowl moment that we have to take care of, and this is where this type of support really comes into play. A couple of next steps. If you're interested to learn more about support, there's a dedicated location on the Amazon webpage where you can get some further information. You can even inquire or sign up on the spot if you'd like to. Of course, it'd be remiss of me not to take the opportunity to promote the AWS podcast, which is put together by Simone Bronazzi and myself on a weekly basis. So if you like to keep up to date with what's happening at Amazon, that's the way to do it. As I mentioned at the start, we are very customer obsessed. So we really would appreciate your feedback on this session, the things you liked, the things you'd like to see more of or less of next time as well. Of course, by giving us this feedback, you get the opportunity to go into a draw for some prizes, so it's good for you as well. If you've got the iPhone app, you can actually, or the Android app as well, you can do it on the app if you need to. So with that, we'd like to open the floor to any questions if anyone has a question for us. And we've got a roving microphone. No question? Excellent. I think everyone's ready for lunch. Well, thank you so much for your attention, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.